Now, it is time, to all those who are here, for us to do the Kanto Pokemon tier list. Admittedly, I am not a Gen 1er. The first time I experienced Gen 1 or Kanto at all was actually in Fire Red and Leaf Green. I didn't get to even play the Crystal games. There's a whole story about why I've never played the Johto original games either, but that's an entirely different thing that we'll get to in the Johto list. But Kanto, I actually had a really good experience with as far as Pokemon Leaf Green goes. I still have, I think, my very first playthrough team on my Leaf Green cartridge. I need to pull that up, but I'll bring up those Pokemon as we get to them, obviously. So what am I ranking these Pokemon on? It's not really going to be any like meta reason or anything like that, obviously. But it will have a factor into it. If the Pokemon is just like bad in every aspect and I don't like their design, then they'll just go with no interest, obviously. And all-time favorite is going to be what Pokemon are like probably in like my top 30 list or something like that. I know everyone has like a top 10 list, but there's so many Pokemon that if it's in like my top 30, then it's an all-time favorite. And that's still such a low percentage of the actual Pokemon that exist, obviously. I think it's, even if you go to top 30, it's like 3%. So, and then everything in it is just in between. If it's just there, you know, I don't hate it, but it's just kind of there. If it's alright, I think it's decent. I've probably used it a couple of times. And if it's a really cool mon, then I've definitely used it before, and I really like its design. So, to begin, and of course I'll also be taking anime into account, which is why that post I put on Twitter might not have been as clickbait as people would think. Alright, so Bulbasaur. I actually like Bulbasaur. It's a pretty good starter. As far as it was in the anime, I always thought it was like one of the coolest of Ash's Pokemon. This and Squirtle never evolved at all, if I recall. But so we never really got to see much of Ivysaur or Venusaur in the anime because of that. But as far as the game, I don't think I've ever actually used Bulbasaur in the Kanto games. I did use Bulbasaur's evolutionary line in one of my Pokemon Rejuvenation runs in the past. And it was just a really decent mon. It was faster. And so we'll also get to Ivysaur. Ivysaur, I think Bulbasaur is actually like really cool. Then Ivysaur is just alright. It's alright. And then Venusaur. I think Venusaur is actually pretty cool. Yeah, Venusaur, and it's faster. That's a lot faster than you'd expect. It's deceptively fast, right? It hits harder than I thought too, and it can take a hit. So as a Pokemon in the meta, it's actually like a really good line. And as far as the designs go, yeah, I think Ivysaur's kind of like whatever. Venusaur's just like really cool, then Bulbasaur's pretty cute. Charmander. Oh boy. Alright, let me go ahead and get this out of the way, right? So, I will put Charmander here. I will put Charmeleon here, because I think Charmeleon is the cooler of the designs. And then Charizard is just kind of there for me. So, there's several reasons for this, right? Charmander, I really like because of that one episode where Ash saved the Charmander from being in the rain and stuff after the trainer abandoned it. Which is actually, like, I'll put him up here. And that was when Charmander, like, really, like, was cool with Ash. And then it evolved into Charmeleon. And for whatever reason, Charmeleon just lost all memory of Ash saving its life. Acted like a ungrateful child to it all the time. And Charizard's attitude became even worse for several years and had to go to training in Charizard City or whatever. Until it was finally beaten, or it finally had respect beaten into it. So I don't like Charizard that much in the anime. I know Charizard's like really cool with Ash now, but like at the beginning, it just kind of stuck with me. Like, hey, Ash saved your life, and you're just kind of like being a dick to him. So it's kind of like, what the hell? And as a Pokemon, I just don't care for it. I think there are better fire types. I think there are even better fire types in this region, just to make sure. Okay, yeah, there are better fire types in this region, in my opinion. Alright, so Squirtle. Squirtle's awesome. Wartortle's pretty cool. Blastoise is pretty cool. Squirtle, I think, is the Squirtle squad in the Pokemon anime for the first generation anime, and then I think also in the Johto generation anime. Squirtle, I think, was really cool. And then with like the glasses and showed up with this and just like being a part of the firefighter squad or whatever, the squirrel squad. War Turtle I think is, I like War Turtle's design, but I think it's just a step down. Or not a step down, it's just it doesn't like, it's a nice transition between the two, I would say. But it doesn't have the cute factor that Squirrel has, and it doesn't have the really badass factor that Blastoise has. Blastoise I think is cool. I usually always pick Blastoise when I do a playthrough on Kanto. Partly because in Kanto, Gyarados, which is probably the only other good water Pokemon, isn't that amazing. Okay, no, I lied. There's other good water Pokemon. Maybe I'll switch it up next time I play Fire Red or Leaf Green. But Blastoise is really cool. It's Mega Evolution, which isn't on here. It's alright. I expected... None of them were... Neither Venusaur nor Blastoise are going to get the love that Charizard did for its Mega Evolution. And that's kind of like... You could say I'm being a hipster by not liking Charizard as much as the others, and one of my reasons being I don't like Charizard because he's overhyped by the community. But I mean, hey man, that's my opinion. Caterpie is just like no interest. Metapod, I will say it's alright because that that one episode where Ash is fighting that one bug catcher in the forest, and their Metapods are just both using Harden, and they're just standing there for almost the entire day. That is still entertaining as hell to this day. And I think Butterfree's pretty alright too. Weedle, no interest. Kakuna is kind of just there. Beedrill, I think, is actually really cool. The cooler of the two bug types. It's apparently very dangerous because, you know, whenever Ash is getting chased by Beedrill, instead of turning around and fighting them with his Pikachu or with as many fire Pokemon that he's had in the past, like Torkoal, like Charizard, he's still running from them. So apparently Beedrill is just incredibly strong in the Pokemon world. Plus, in the Pokemon manga, Giovanni has one, and spoilers for those who have not read the Pokemon manga, he literally has this Beedrill, like... First of all, he has the Mega Beedrill, which I think Mega Beedrill is actually really cool. And Beedrill is kind of just Giovanni's assassin in the manga. It's kind of crazy. Pidgey, I think, is kind of just there. Pidgeotto, I think, is alright. Pidgeot, I think, is alright. So, I'm not too big a fan of the Pidgeot line. I think it's definitely better than some of the other flying types we get later on. But it's not as good as some of the ones we get later on as well. I think the reunion the farewell between Ash and Pidgeot, it wasn't as good as the farewell between him and Butterfree. Like that was tear-jerking when he separated from Butterfree. But Pidgeot wasn't as, like, emotional invoking, despite, I don't think it was there longer than Butterfree. It may have been, it may not have. I forget. I can't remember everything from the anime. Mega Pidgeot's actually really cool. I would put Mega Pidgeot in really cool, but it's not here, sadly. But I just think it's alright. Rattata, no interest. Raticate, no interest. I just have no interest in either of these Pokemon. I actually really hate rats, because when I was younger, I remember I woke up one night and I heard this fucking, like, clawing or whatever, right? Or it sounded like something was gnawing on something. And I turn the light on, and I see a fucking rat coming out from, like, this corner in my, this corner area from underneath the floor. And I just start freaking out. It was, ugh. Very few things I remember from my childhood, and that is one of them. So, Spearow, I think, is, like, up there with Pidgey. It's just there. And Fearow, I think, is also just there. I know a lot of people, for whatever reason, said at the first episode of Pokemon, oh, no, that's not a Ho-Oh, that's a Fearow. I'm like, what? No. We go get Ho-Oh in a later generation. But it's not the first Pokemon that's been shown in a generation before the one it actually debuts in. But Fearow, that's kind of just what Fearow is known for. Hey, I'm the possible fake-out Ho-Oh. Its moveset is alright. I've never used one. It's actually pretty funny, and if you look at the Pokemon Distillation playthrough I did, the shiny because some of these fan games do custom shinies, the shiny Fearow is Ho-Oh, essentially, which is pretty funny. Eggins, I think, is alright. Arbok, I think, is really cool. So, I've always liked Team Rocket. They were always my favorite characters in the anime. And the episode where they evolved Eggins into Arbok, I think was, like, really cool with the Diglets and everything. And then Arbok and Weezing are actually, like, throwing their weight around until, you know, 1,000 Diglett gain up with them, and what can you do? But I also remember the debut episode of Team Rocket, right? Where they were actually competent. You know, they were going into this Pokemon Center. They were going to take all these Pokemon. James had a different voice actor. And Eggins and Koffing were just pretty menacing then. Especially Koffing. I actually like Koffing and Weezing more. So, alright, the mascot. I think Pikachu's just alright. I have no particular love or hatred towards it. I don't particularly like how this one specific Pikachu can apparently match legendary Pokemon. But, I mean, it is what it is. I think there's nothing wrong with Pikachu as a character. Like, if you're one of those people who takes power scaling seriously, yeah, you might put Pikachu down here for like, oh, why is it that strong? But like, I don't mind. And we're not ranking the character, we're ranking the Pokemon as a whole. I think it's alright. Raichu, I think, is kind of just a step down meanwhile. But I would put a Alolan Raichu, like, up here. Sandshrew is just alright. And so is Sandslash. Sandshrew's most memorable moment for me, I've never used it, right? But I remember there was this one episode of Pokemon where, like, you had this Sandshrew with, like, a weight vest and this trainer, and, like, they were fighting off, like, Team Rocket. Like, they were taking on Team Rocket on their own. And I think that was really cool, because this guy won, like, 100 battles in a row or something. And Sandslash, again, we don't know too much. I have Sandshrew over it. But it looks cool. It's, like, pretty much a hedgehog, a crowned hedgehog. The Alolan versions are a step up for me, like they are for most Pokemon. So, alright. I'm also going to put these 4 Pokemon here. Actually, I'm going to put Nidoran up here, because Nidoran's pretty cool. I remember it in the, when Ash was watching it, some person used that against a Gengar for some reason in the anime, in like that first episode where he was watching the tournament. But that's the only thing. Then I've used like Nidorans before, but usually by the time in the playthrough I get to the point where I get a Moonstone, I kind of just like have already phased this Pokemon out for something else. But I think Nidoking and Nidoqueen are both pretty cool. I mean, one day I'll get to use them. Maybe I'll get to use them in the Desolation playthrough, but for now they'll just go here. They have pretty cool movesets and they look really cool. Actually put Nidoking up here, it's pretty cool. Clefairy and Clefable are just kind of there for me. I've never used them, and I only can remember them for that one episode of Mount Moon in the anime. And I don't think they were that relevant ever since. Pokemon, if all I can rate them on is their design, then it's going to be pretty much self-explanatory. If I don't like their design, they're just, and I have no other info on them, then they're just kind of just placed where I think their design is. I think Vulpix is alright, and I think Ninetales is like really cool. Ninetales is like one of the coolest Pokemon to me, especially in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. For anyone that's played the original Pokemon Dungeon on the Game Boy, or was it the DS? I'm pretty sure it was the Game Boy though. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red and I forget what the titles exactly were called, but Ninetales was very involved in that game, and it was like you were spoiler for anyone that has not played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Ninetales cursed you into apparently cursed you and Gengar into becoming Pokemon, because you were humans that mistreated it or whatever. Or at least that was the case for Gengar. I kind of forgot what the case was for us becoming a Pokemon was. But I always thought it was really cool that Ninetales had this like mystical energy around it. And it was only after like in my teenage years when I learned about Japanese mythology and Kitsune that was what this was based on. And Ninetales is just really cool. Clefairy is alright because it was always entertaining to me. Clefable's alright. Clefairy, like, drawing on everyone's faces and seeing them asleep is really cool. But I've never used them as a Pokemon. Clefable also is... Or no, Wigglytuff. Holy shit, I actually got them confused. No, yeah. Jigglypuff I meant, not Clefairy. Always drawn on people's faces was really cool. And then Clefable. Clefable I remember as the Guildmaster to the best Pokemon Mystery Dungeons game, Explorers of Sky. That game will never be topped. As far as a Mystery Dungeon series goes, anyway. I don't think they will ever be able to create a game as... a Mystery Dungeon game, I should say. As good as Explorers of Sky. And I know Wigglytuff was the Guildmaster for your guild in that game. And the whole guild thing was so cool. Zubat. I actually like Zubat. And Golbat. Golbat I think is pretty cool as well. So you can probably already see where Crobat's going by this progression. But Zubat I never minded. The only problem I have with Zubat is whenever I'm in a cave, every 2 steps is a Zubat, so I have to use a repel. Zubat is the reason we have to spend repels all the time in caves. But I think Zubat's a pretty good Pokemon. Most games, I will use Zubat, the Zubat line, as my flying Pokemon. Yeah, in Gens 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know about 7. Yeah, at least through Gens 2 through 6, I've always used Crobat, even though I've also used Staraptor and Swellow. But Crobat, the Zubat line is just always reliable. You know, they're very tricky in that they're Confuse Ray and Poison and all that. I actually remember my Crobat beat someone's Mega Aerodactyl because of Confusion and Poison Axe. So, never underestimate Confuse Ray, never underestimate the bat. Also, I like the blue and purple coloring. Oddish. I think Oddish is just there. I think Gloom is just there. But I think Vileplume is actually alright. I've never used these Pokemon either, but I think Vileplume is a really cool design, you know, the spores and everything, and how it has a hat to protect itself from it. Which I think is also why Gloom kind of is like this, because it kind of gets affected by its own stuff. But then Vileplume has the hat to protect itself from its thing. I think that's how it works. But it's actually a pretty decent Pokemon from what I remember. Alright, Paris. Listen. It's a combination of I don't care for the design, and I'm actually very creeped out by the lore of this Pokemon. This is the most terrifying Pokemon, I think. And maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe as we go on to the other regions, I'll find something I actually do fear more. But at least for Gen 1, this is the most terrifying Pokemon as a concept. Because this is not the Pokemon. Yeah, the mushroom is the Pokemon. It is controlling the zombified corpse of this thing, of this Krabby, I think. It's actually terrifying. I think the concept is weird. And there is something cool about it, but it's just not for me. Venonat is just there. We'll put it at the top of just there, because I remember... Okay, controversial thing here, right? I think I still own a copy of the Pokemon Orange Islands DVD set. I just have to find it somewhere. I did not mind when Brock was replaced by Tracy for a bit, because I had a feeling it was going to be temporary, and I didn't mind Tracy as a character. Tracy is way better than Silent or what's his name from the Kalos region, the Electric Gym leader. Shows how important he is. I don't remember his name, but anyway, I think Tracy, as far as all the Brock replacements, he was the best one, and Venonat was like a pretty decently cool looking Pokemon at the time. Venomoth, I think, is actually like really alright. I think it's like the best bug Pokemon in this generation. I have not used it until the later generations where it could learn Quiver Dance and a very diversified moveset. And from then on, I just kind of like, whenever I could find a good Venomoth, I would just always use it. It can be really good in battles. And I think its coloring is actually pretty cool. It's the coolest looking bug Pokemon out of the first gen, by far, like I said earlier. The color pattern is cool. Moths, I think, are just pretty alright up there as far as like bugs go anyway. There are some of the ones I don't mind. I mean, I think I've never used them, right? I've never used Diglett or Dugtrio. The only reason that they're this high is because of that one anime episode I mentioned earlier where James and Jesse evolved their Pokemon. And then they got outed by like a bunch of Diglett and Dugtrio. And that's really all I know about them. There isn't too much to say about them. I've never used them. It's a pretty basic design. I don't feel like there's anything that can justify them being really cool. Not even the Alolan versions that have hair. Meowth. I love Meowth from the anime. This is 100% because Meowth in the anime is like really fun. He's just part of Team Rocket. I really love Team Rocket. Persian is actually just all right. There's nothing really to say about Persian, except for when Giovanni finally battled Ash in the anime for once, and his Persian just like won. I think it defeated Pikachu in like one shot. So there isn't much to say about Persian as a whole, but Meowth, I mean, I could talk about that one forever, but he's kind of just like the glue that kind of kept Jesse and James together whenever like they had their little fights and separated. Meowth was kind of the one to help bring them back together. At least that's how I see it. Psyduck is alright. Golduck is alright. I was about to put Golduck in just there, but then I remembered that Golduck is sort of my first shiny in main games. We'll get to my actual main shiny later in this video, because I actually do have a... If you want to know who my first shiny is, we'll get to them later, but they were a Gen 1 Pokemon. But I think Psyduck was like really amusing in the anime, just every time he showed up. I have a major problem with this line for it not being Water Psychic. I don't know why they gave it like psychic abilities, but then it's just a Water type Pokemon. And there are a lot of typing issues in Gen 1 that we'll also get to later on. But this was one of them. This was a missed opportunity, I think. A Water Psychic type, although we already had, so that I can probably see why they didn't want to do it again. But it's alright. Mankey is just there. Primeape is just there. I've never used him. The design is just pretty basic, and I only remember Ash like catching like a wild Primeape, and then it put the hat and everything, and he proceeded to give it up several episodes later. So I mean, if Ash, you know, as he is, was so willing to give up this Pokemon, I mean, there ain't much to say about it, is there? Growlithe is all right. Arcanine is really cool. I know I don't have Arcanine like as high as most people would, but I've used Growlithe and Arcanine very few times, but the times I've used them, they are actually pretty good. I do not like, in Gen 1, not just Gen 1, in I think Gen 1 through 7, it's one of those Pokemon where you cannot evolve it until you have its full moveset as Growlithe, because for whatever reason they decided Arcanine not learning moves amongst other Pokemon was a good idea. It was a terrible idea. I don't know what possessed them to do it, in all honesty, but... you know, so I think actually I'll move Growlithe a little up here because Growlithe is actually like Growlithe is a really cool Pokemon. You always see them with the police and stuff. I'll put him up here. I'll actually do like this. I'll probably do some like fine tuning on this later. For now, I guess we'll just like kind of set them where without thinking too much about it. Poliwag is all right. Poliwhirl is all right, and Poliwrath is all right. I think these are really cool Pokemon. While I've never used them, I do love the simplicity in the design. I think Misty had one, right? Yeah, Misty had one in the anime. Poliwhirl was always like really cool. Then she evolved into a Politoed, which I don't like Politoed as much as Poliwrath. The only reason Politoed I would use one is because it has Drizzle, not because of the design. But I think this is one of those cases where like simple's best. And this is just like a really simple, but also a really nice design. Also, water fighting is a pretty cool type. Abra is just there. Kadabra is alright. And Alakazam is just alright. I'm not too fond of the design, if I'm being honest. Like, it's just a psychic thing. I don't know what it's supposed to resemble. With spoons and a mustache. I've never used him. I have never used the Abra line at all in any Pokemon game, main, fan, even mystery dungeons, right? I have never used this Pokemon. Actually, yeah, I'm just gonna move them down here just there. The fact that this is such a popular Pokemon line and I've never used them, I mean, I kind of just have to put them here. I mean, I almost want to put them in no interest if I'm being honest, right? But we won't go that far yet. Machop is just there. Machoke is just there. Machamp is just there. Now, the reason I think I don't like the designs that much, mostly because I was a Ben 10 fan as well, growing up. And I remember Forearms. This was the Forearms at home. You had Forearms from Ben 10, and then this was the Forearms at home. Even though Ben 10 came out later, I just remember like Forearms as better than this. And it's alright. I've never used the line, by the way. Part of why I've never used either of these lines is because I've never had somebody to trade Pokemon with, so it's like, I'm not going to raise this Pokemon and then proceed to, not be able to evolve it. There's no point. Bellsprout is just there. Weeping Bill is just there. However, Victory Bell is really cool. Some of you might be seeing a trend here. Team Rocket Pokemon. I really, really, really always enjoyed whenever James was attacked by his Victory Bell for no reason. It was always some of the funniest skits in the Pokemon anime. And I actually think Victory Bell is like a really cool looking Pokemon, in all honesty. Like, actually, we'll say this guy's alright. But Victory Bell is like the Venus Flytrap, right? And Grass Poison, common typing, obviously, but it's a pretty neat typing. The fucking yell that it has, I will always remember because of the anime, right? I've never used it. I think I used it once, but it was such a long time ago that I forgot. Because there's just so many grass poison types when Rose Raid came out. When Rose Raid came out, that was it. You were never going to use another grass poison type. For many reasons. Also, like the Leaf Stone, I mean, I just never got it for whatever reason. I'm trying to remember what my Leaf Green team is without grabbing it. So, but I know Blastoise and Ninetales, I believe, were on there. And I'll have to remember the others as we go. Tentacool, I think Tentacool is alright. I think Tentacruel is like pretty cool. Water Poison, very good typing, obviously. Tentacool, I remember there was this like one episode where there was this like flood of Tentacool like invading the city or whatever, and there's like this huge Tentacruel that was like destroying buildings and stuff, and I thought, this is so cool. And then you find out that Tentacruel is actually probably shorter than you are. Yes, you, the viewer. It's shorter than me. And I'm 6 foot, so that was actually very surprising for me to learn. But Tentacruel is actually really cool. I like the design, like the red bulbs that glow on its head. The tentacles obviously are cool. It's one of those Pokemon that, again, I've never used. I've used Tentacool. I've never used Tentacruel. It's not because I don't like the Pokemon. This is a Pokemon I've used because there were better alternatives to the Pokemon. Because I always use Blastoise in my Kanto run-throughs, I just never found a reason to have Tentacruel on my team. Because I was like that person that did not want multiple Pokemon of the same type on my team. Ironically, that kind of came to an end in later gens when they added, like, when some gens had 4 water HMs. And I'm like, alright, I cannot teach a water Pokemon every single HM and still use it in battle. I have to divide this up. Geodude is alright. Graveler is alright. And Golem is alright. I think they're a really cool Pokemon. I remember Brock's Geodude, but I don't think he ever evolved it, did he? He might have. It just might not have been during the journey. But I think it's decent. You know, a rock with fists, very original, right? But again, it's just one of those designs like we're the Poliwhirl line. You know, basic is sometimes good. Ponyta is alright, and Rapidash is actually up here, I would say. Horse on Fire, like I said, basic design, but that doesn't mean it's bad. A lot of Gen 1 designs are actually pretty basic, but that it's not to be bad. Like, sometimes you can go too over the top, like Alakazam, and then I'm like sitting here wondering, what the hell are you? You're just whatever. That's why I have the Fire Horse over it, because I can appreciate a simpler design sometimes. I've never used. Is my internet acting up? Internet seems to be on the fritz. We will see how this goes. Alright, so Slowpoke, right? Water Psychic. I think it was a pretty cool design. Slowbro, I think, is the. I've never used it, but I remember an episode where we just saw like a Slowpoke on a rock, and for whatever reason, a Shelder bites its tail. And then Slowpoke is just sitting there with like the most deadpan reaction. And then it evolves. Like no reaction other than evolving, right? So it's kind of like, what the hell? Like that just happened. It's one of those things where that just happened. You know. Let's see. And then yeah, there isn't much to say. I think it's a decent Pokemon. I'll probably start using it in Scarlet and Violet because apparently Slowbro is like a really nice tank to start using against all these event Pokemon that are coming in. So we'll see. I still haven't finished Scarlet and Violet, by the way, but I actually plan on doing that at some point in the future. Hopefully this week. Okay. Remember what I said about simple designs and how I can appreciate a very good simple design more than I can appreciate complex. The Magneton line is one of my favorite lines in the entirety of Pokemon. Yes, I know it's just a magnet and 3 magnets stuck together. I have always used this Pokemon. In every generation, I have always used this Pokemon as in any game that I could obtain it. You know, in Gen 1, or in the Fire Red and Leaf Green games, I would use either Magneton or Jolteon. Sometimes I swapped it up. In Gen 3, Pokemon Emerald, I used Magneton. In Gen 4, Platinum, I used Magnezone. In Gen 5, Black and White 2, I used Magnezone. And so on, and so on, and so forth. I have just always used the Magneton line. Steel Electric's a really good typing. And it's just a signature Pokemon for me. I will always use this Pokemon no matter what. And it has broken my will to go through games and only use the regional inhabitants. I don't know, it's probably my favorite electric Pokemon overall, if I'm being honest. It's I won't say it's close because I actually have to think about what can compete with it. But I think it's undisputedly my favorite electric type Pokemon of all time. Farfetch'd is alright. You know, I had to chase them around in Johto, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver were my first Johto games. By the way. And I only remember this Pokemon from the Johto games. I have no memory about this Pokemon, aside from, you know, go into these woods and catch this thing. Because I need it to make Pokeballs or something, right? That's all I remember it from, but it's a decent design. You know. I have no interest in these Pokemon. Sometimes simple is good, sometimes it's kind of whatever. I just have no interest in the 2- or 3-headed bird. I've never used them. I've never been compelled to use them. I think they were kind of annoying, especially in Pokemon Emerald, where you would rebattle these trainers and they would always send them out. And you would not expect it to outspeed certain Pokemon. And I did, and then I lost certain Pokemon to them, and then I got mad. Never had... This list, right, is for Pokemon I have never even considered using. So I guess I kind of have to move these two up into just there. Because not interested means just never used. So, you know what? I'm just gonna move you guys here too. I actually have used Machoke in the past, but I've never used Kadabra or this line at all. So, oh man, I can already. I'm putting favorites in the no interest tier. Yikes. We'll see how that goes though. Seal and Dewgong. I think they're really cool. I think they're better Pokemon of this archetype that we'll see in later regions. But I think that the Dewgong line is really cool. I've never used it, but the design, again, it's one of those simple designs that I appreciate. Like, I love the dumb look on Seal's face. I think Dewgong is like pretty cool. And there isn't much more to say about that. Water Icing, I think, or Water Ice, I think, is just a really nice type. Grimer. Okay. Here's the story about Grimer, right? I have never used Grimer or Muck until Pokemon Reborn. Fan games like Pokemon Reborn taught me to make do with the some of like the lower level or lower tier Pokemon that you could find, right? So I remember I fished up a Grimer in this toxic lake. This Grimer and then later Muck carried me throughout like the first 12 badges or whatever. Basically, it carried me throughout the early and middle game of Pokemon Reborn. Because Grimer and Muck are like really good defensively with Minimize, when Minimize got buffed to giving a +2 to evasion instead of a +1. And then you can get Acid Armor on it, put Black Sludge on it, and then just train its special defense. This thing can become a nice wall. At least against AI. Probably, I don't know if it would work that well against other trainers. So I'm actually going to put them up here. And now that I look at it, there's a lot of poison Pokemon and really cool. I like poison Pokemon a lot, it seems. But I never hated the design. It's just there are other poison Pokemon that interested me, right? Like the Crobat line, like the Arbok line. But this, I now have a much stronger appreciation of this Pokemon because of fan games forcing this Pokemon onto me and making me realize, hey, this can be a really good Pokemon. Alright. Shelder and Cloyster. I think they're alright. Shelder with the cute tongue sticking out. It's really cute. And again, I remember the Shelder biting on the Slowbro and they both became... I don't know how this became this, honestly. But I mean, F it, I guess. And Cloyster's really cool. I think I've used him like once, but the skill link is really cool. You have Water Ice as a type in Shell Smash with skill link plus Icicle Spear. You can make a very decent sweeper out of this Pokemon. And Water Ice, most Ice Pokemon are going to get a buff just for being Ice Pokemon, if I'm being honest. But I remember there was... Oh yeah, there was also that episode on of Pokemon, now I just remembered, where Misty was fighting one of the biker people, and they used a Cloyster, and this Cloyster just destroyed, like, it clamped on Psyduck, and everyone was just, like, laughing at Psyduck and stuff, and it was just, like, one of those little moments that I remember, because my memory is honestly quite bad, but, so, like, the memories that I do still have, I kind of, like, just look back on and have, like, probably more nostalgia than I should. But I just remember, like, this made me laugh, so... And I like its design, so you know what? It's alright. Even if I've never used it, it's alright. Ghastly, Haunter, Gengar. So, I actually like Ghastly's design more than Haunter's. I do have... The reason I'm going to put Haunter and Ghastly so low, compared to Gengar, I know, so low, right? Is... This happened to me in Gen 4, right? This happened to me in Gen 4. Just like I'm sure it happened to all of you in Gen 4. Oh. Do you want to trade your Metatite, or whatever it was, for my Haunter? Are you telling me the game is going to give me a free Gengar before the 7th gym? Before Snowpoint Gym? Oh, this is easy. Yes, give me that Haunter so it can evolve. And then she trades you the Haunter. And then it doesn't evolve. And then you ask her, what the fuck is this? And then she says, ha, I bet you weren't expecting an Everstone on that Haunter. I have never hated an NPC more in Pokemon, at least in my life. Still to this day. And that includes fan games. She is a worse person than Dr. Sigmund. I'm debating if she's a worse person than Lynn, but Haunter, whenever I see that, I just get bad memories. So I cannot put it in all-time favorite. Gengar is an all-time favorite, though. Gengar is really good. Whenever I got a chance to use it, it always comes through. Ghost Poison, I think, is a really good typing. The design is very simple, but also really cool. It was in the first Pokemon episode I saw, obviously, as I mentioned. I think it was the first Pokemon episode where Ash is watching the tournament. You see Gengar fighting Nidoran. So it was probably the first Pokemon I've ever seen, actually. If I'm remembering right, it was definitely one of the first Pokemon I ever saw. Whether it was before Pikachu or not, I don't know, right? But I will always have like this Pokemon in like fond memory. And it's just always nice to use. It kind of got a nerf when they changed Levitate to Curse Body. But it's just so fast, and you just don't send it out against a ground Pokemon, obviously. A lot of Pokemon I like are actually weak to ground types, now that I think about it. Onix, I think, is really cool. Simple, but I like snakes. It's a rock snake. It's really cool. The only downside to it is apparently you can beat it with sprinklers and thunderbolts. Or Thunder Shock. I'm giving too much credit. Thunder Shock, not Thunderbolt, right? But I always thought Onix was a really cool Pokemon. And I remember in the Orange Islands, they actually found like a Crystal Onix. And that thing was like the coolest looking thing ever. I think that was the first shiny Pokemon I've ever seen. If it was a shiny. It might have just been like its own thing, right? Drowsy, I think, is alright. Hypno is just there. Hypno would be in no interest, but I actually do think Drowsy looks pretty cool. I remember this one episode from the Orange Islands. Again, the Orange Islands. I have very good memories of the Orange Islands. There was this one episode, right, where Botch and Cassidy had like this Drowsy hypnotize all the Pokemon on an island and make them hostile to their trainers. And it had this like amplification device or whatever on its head too. I thought that it was one of my favorite episodes in the Orange Islands because it was so cool. It tested like the bond between Ash and Pikachu. Seriously, if you guys have not seen the Orange Island episodes, I would recommend it if you can find it at a good price, that is, or if you can just find it like online on a legal site, of course. But yeah, I think Drowsy is only this high because I have like interesting memories of it. Now, I've used Drowsy before too. I've just never used Hypno. It was alright. Krabby is alright. Caneler is pretty cool. I actually like a lot of like shellfish type Pokemon. Not because I would like to eat them, but that may be a factor. Caneler is just, I think, really cool. That's all there is to it. It's just a basic design. I think it's cool. And yeah. So, Voltorb and Electrode are kind of just there. There isn't much to say. I've used them in the past several times. Obviously, I prefer their Magnemite counter. It's a very basic design. And this is just one of... Actually, no. You know what? It really helped me a lot in Pokemon Rejuvenation, now that I remember. In the early game. Man, it has a decent moveset, right? And its speed is, like, ridiculous. It looks basic, but it's pretty alright. And I also remembered I really liked, in particular, its sprite from Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. When you fight the Team Snag'em leader, I believe he uses one. Alright. No interest and no interest. I've never used either of these Pokemon. I'm sure Grass Psychic is a good typing, but I've never used them at all. They just look like a bunch of eggs to me, right? Actually, that's not fair. I think Exeggutor looks interesting to me. I can't say there's no interest in it, but I just like don't feel like raising this, right? Cubone. I'll be honest, it's just there. I'm trying to like channel in the trauma of the Cubone wearing its mother's skull because of the Team Rocket incident. That's not enough to win me over. Because I've never used these Pokemon at all in any game. I don't even know their moveset other than Bone Moraine and Bone Club or whatever, right? I think the design is alright, but it's just kind of there for me. Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. They're just fighters. I think Hitmonlee is slightly cooler than Hitmonchan. I'll put them over, you know. I'll put them over these, right? But they're just fighters. They're just fighting Pokemon. They're just like really basic designs. There isn't much to say about them. I think Hitmonlee is definitely cooler because like the extendo legs. But that's it. Lickitung is also just alright because I've never used it. But I'll put it a little higher because I do remember Jessie's Lickitung was actually just like really funny sometimes. But she eventually traded it away for a much better Pokemon that we'll get to next. Yeah, in Johto. Alright. This one's tough, right? I love coughing and wheezing. I can't say I've never used them. I used them like once. It's just I don't remember too much about it. James's coughing was always really cool, then it evolved into wheezing, honestly. I always liked this Pokemon as a design. I thought the design was always like really interesting. Wheezing is a interesting but disturbing concept. But coughing I think is just cooler. Partly because of its voice in the anime. Rhyhorn and Rhydon. So Rhydon is another Pokemon I'm using in my playthrough or I used in my last playthrough for Pokemon Leaf Green. Really solid Pokemon. I think they're both really cool Pokemon. Rhinos are cool. Rhydon is a very, very, very strong Pokemon, I think, in Gen 1. With its typing. Yeah, it's weak to water and grass, but this thing will mow down, and I have used it to mow down so many opponents before. And it's just a cornerstone of any Gen 1 team, I think. The only problem is Rhyhorn evolves so late. I think at level 42. But I actually delayed my Rhyhorn's evolution until level 52 so I could learn it Earthquake before I got to the Pokemon League, right? Because Rhydon learns Earthquake at 62 within Leaf Green. So I remember specific things like that. Chansey is just there for me. There's nothing to say. It's the nurse Pokemon you see in every Pokemon Center. I've never used it. I actually hate whenever I have to fight it because it's so annoying to fight. And that's pretty much it. A lot of these Pokemon that we're going to get to now I'm seeing are incomplete, as in the rest of their line ain't here, man. Tangela is pretty alright. I like the design. I think it's actually pretty interesting. You know, I don't know why it has shoes, but it has shoes. Tangrowth. I've used Tangela and Tangrowth before. Mostly as a Tangrowth. It's a decent Pokemon. Kangaskhan is also alright. You know. I'm not sure I support Breen your, what do they call them? It's supposed to be a kangaroo. What's it supposed to... I don't support bring your Joey to the Battleground Day, obviously. Because I think that's dangerous. And then Mega Kangaskhan has caused me a lot of grief when people have used it. It was so annoying. I hate Mega Kangaskhan so much. But I remember Giovanni using it as well. It was kind of a pushover in Gen 1. It's kind of just there, actually, now that I think about it, huh? Alright, Horsey. This line is really cool. I remember Misty had one. I don't think she ever evolved the Horsey, obviously, but I remember Horsey was like always pretty cute, always One of my favorite Pokemon when I was watching the anime. I think Misty caught it during that Tentacool and Tentacruel episode I was talking about earlier, actually. And then Seadra is not as cute, obviously, but it's pretty cool, and I love their evolution. Goldeen is just there. Seaking is alright. I mean, they're just fish. Goldfish and then koi fish. I mean, they're literally just fish. I always liked Staryu, and then Starmie was pretty cool. I never used them, actually. I can't recall a time I've ever used Staryu or Starmie, but I love their design so much that I put them this high. Water Psychic, I think, is a good typing. We have, and I guess because of Starmie and Slowbro line, we didn't get Psyduck as another Water Psychic because they probably thought, oh, that'll be too much, right? I guess. I will probably use it one day. If I can find one early on before I can find a Gyarados or something, right? Mr. Mime is just there. I find Mr. Mime amusing because of all the memes about him in the anime. I remember there was a theory that Mr. Mime is Ash's father, and it's the single chuckle I got out of that theory that keeps him out of no interest. Also, I will say, giving him the fairy typing made Mr. Mime from a Pokemon I will never use to a Pokemon I will consider using. Because Fairy Psychic is actually just a really good typing. If I ever to put together a Psychic or a Fairy team, I probably will use a Mr. Mime. Just so I can have them put the screens up. But that'd probably be it. Scyther is like really cool. I remember Tracy from the Orange Islands had one. And then I think it's supposed to be a praying mantis, right? That's Lurantis, though, isn't it? Okay. There isn't too much to go on about it. I just remember Tracy had one, and any Pokemon Tracy had, I probably will put a little high just because I think Tracy was actually really cool. Jinx, just there, bro. I can't say I've never used it because I actually did use one recently in Pokemon Desolation. Ice and Psychic is a good typing. I don't like the design. I really don't like the design. I really do not like the design. I don't know, it's just... It's not even like, you know, the obvious reason, right? It's just, it doesn't look like an appealing Pokemon at all to me. It never did. But because of its typing and its moveset, I've considered using it. And have used it recently. Electabuzz is cool. This is one of those Pokemon that I probably would have considered using in Gen 1 if you know it had the full evolutionary line. Because Electivire is really cool. But Electabuzz by itself is alright. It's not it's not phenomenal, but I think it's really cool. I remember... I'm trying to remember who first used one in the anime that I can recall, right? And it's not coming to mind. But big electric thing punching people to death with electric fists is really cool. Magmar is alright. I don't like it as much as Electabuzz. I've used the Magmar line less than I've used the Electabuzz or Rhydon line. So it kind of just fits, and these three kind of just fit together because they're Pokemon that got a better evolution in Sinnoh. Although people probably would argue they didn't need it. I would say the evolutions that the three of them got were pretty good. Magmar's a decent fire Pokemon, but I obviously have Ninetales and Arcanine over it for reasons. Because they're just better and they look cooler. Magmar's kind of just like this weird duck that's on fire. Pinsir is it's a really decent design. I think it's a very terrifying looking bug Pokemon, and I think that's kind of the thing you kind of want to aim for with certain bug Pokemon. I don't like it as much as Venomoth, but I think that as a Stag Beetle, it's like really cool. I think it's, no, Rhinoceros Beetle, right? Or isn't that Heracross? I actually don't know what Pinsir is supposed to be. But I remember it had pretty cool moves. It was actually somewhat challenging whenever I encountered one. And you always kind of remember something that gives you a challenge, right? I remember somebody used Guillotine on me and it actually worked, and then I was like, wait, what the hell does that move do? And then I looked it up, like, what do you mean one-hit KO? But the accuracy is bad, so... Tauros is alright. Actually, it's kind of just there. I've never used a Tauros at all. and I've thought about using them before in the past, but I've just never kind of like, went for it. It's a decent looking Pokemon. I won't say it's like bad, but I've never used it, so I have no experience as far as like its moveset or anything, and I've seen so little of them. I guess the fact that Ash has 28 of them means they're good though. Magikarp. Gyarados is probably my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. Also, so remember when I said that Golduck was not my first shiny Pokemon in a main game, but it was like my second? Gyarados was my first shiny Pokemon I ever caught in a Pokemon main game. And so I hear you guys saying, oh, Velucian. We don't count the red Gyarados from the Lake of Rage. Neither do I. The first shiny Pokemon I ever caught outside of the Lake of Rage was a shiny Gyarados in Pokemon X and Y when I was on this river and I was fishing. The Gyarados comes up and it's shiny and I am just sitting there stunned for several minutes looking at my screen and thinking, this is my first shiny Pokemon. But then I'm like, now I'm like, how many people can say that their first legit shiny Pokemon was a shiny Gyarados? Not many people. Magikarp is that high because I always have Magikarp. I think Magikarp's a decent design, by the way. The koi fish that runs, and the fish that jumps up the waterfall to evolve into a dragon, I always thought was like a really cool story. So, I've never knocked Magikarp. Obviously, they can be strong. Remember that one episode in Sinnoh, where Ash's Pikachu lost to a Magikarp and a Feebas. And then, of course, there's this one custom move on a Pokemon Showdown called Magikarp's Revenge. But Gyarados is just a really cool Pokemon. I always use it whenever I can. Dragon Dance sweep with it is just the classic. Its design is really, really, really cool. The only knock I have for it is I think it should have been a Water Dragon, but I understand why they didn't make it a Water Dragon in Gen 1. Because if they did, its only weakness would have been Dragon Rage, and Dragon Rage only does a flat 40 damage. If they made Gyarados a Water Dragon, it would have been way too powerful, and it would have just completely dominated the game. No excuse for its Mega Evolution not being a Water Dragon, though, because Freeze Dry exists. Lapras is also really cool. I remember Ash had one in the anime. I think I've used them, like, once in Leaf Green when they give one to you, right? But I kind of, like, stuck it in the PC because I had Blastoise. But Lapras, Water, Ice, again, a really cool typing, really nice. Even though it's a common typing, I really like the typing, right? I think it's a really cool Pokemon. I remember, I think when I was a kid, I actually did cry when Ash released Lapras. It was, oh man. But, yeah, it has the Plesiosaur / Loch Ness Monster look, which I'm actually, like, I think it's possible something like the Loch Ness Monster existed, so I've always kind of just, like, been interested in that as a concept. So Lapras, as a whole, is just, like, really cool for me. It's pretty tanky. It can learn some good moves, and it's just really cool. Ditto, no interest. I've never used it. I've never used it for anything but breeding. I always figured if I want the Pokemon that it transforms into, I'll just catch the Pokemon. Eevee is alright. I think as a base evolution for all the evolutions, it actually looks pretty cool. Or not cool, it looks cute. But it's not meant to be a Pokemon that you're supposed to use, right? These are the Pokemon you're meant to use. So Flareon is alright. And then Jolteon and Vaporeon are up here. Vaporeon, I actually like Jolteon a little more because I've used Jolteon. I don't think I've used Vaporeon before. I've used Jolteon a lot because it's a fast electric-type Pokemon and one of the better electric-type Pokemons you can get in Leaf Green to use. Flareon I've never used because Flareon has been bad until they gave it Flare Blitz. When they gave it Flare Blitz, it finally became good, But by then, there were already so many evolutions that I just never got around to using it. Vaporeon, I know, is very tanky. They can also be used as a stall Pokemon, but I actually preferred Umbreon to Vaporeon as far as that goes. And then, like I said, Jolteon is the one I've used. I actually like its design. I think I like Vaporeon's design a little more, but I've actually used Jolteon, so I'll give Jolteon the edge here. Porygon is no interest. I've never had an interest in this Pokemon. Even Porygon 2. Porygon Z I kind of have an interest in, but Porygon and Porygon 2 I just have no interest in. Ammonite and Amistar are really cool. I've used Amistar once. And I'll actually say Kabuto is pretty up here, and then Kabutops is like, I actually like Kabuto more than I like Kabutops. But for the 4 fossil Pokemon, I've never used the Kabutops line, but I've used the Amistar line like once. It's pretty decent. Water Rock is a pretty nice typing. I really, really, really love their design though. So despite me never having like, not even remembering how I use them, they're this high just because I really like the design. Also, Helix fossil, Lord Helix, right? Is that the right one? I forget. It should be. Kabuto is like really cool. I remember there was something in the anime episode about Kabuto and Bill. I forget what exactly, but I remember Kabuto looking creepy as hell, and it just looked pretty cool though too. Kabutops Kabutops is kind of like Scyther, you know, but not as cool as Scyther. Aerodactyl is all right. Actually, I'll put it up here. I've never used one. I've used a lot more flying types, but I've never used Aerodactyl. Mostly because I never had the patience to. Actually, wait a minute. No, I did use an Aerodactyl in Leaf Green until I replaced it with Dragonite. So, there's that. But I obviously didn't use it for long. And it's also partly because you get the Aerodactyl like at a low level in Leaf Green, and leveling your Pokemon at that point in the game from like level 20 or whatever you hatched it to, all the way to like level 40 where you're at, took so much time. I just did not even bother, right? You know, when I get distracted easily, and I was not able to like focus enough to do that kind of stuff. So, and that's not even me as a kid. That's just me as an adult. Even now, I wouldn't be able to like put in the focus enough to train it up that much high unless I had like experience boosts. So, Snorlax is really good, man. This is also another Pokemon I've used in my Leaf Green playthrough, my recent one. It learns a really diverse moveset. I really like Snorlax in the anime, where it's just able to like take attacks and then just dish out really heavy attacks in return. It does that in both the anime and the game. Snorlax is just, it's simple, but it's so fucking cool. It's really cool. I almost want to put it in favorites, right? I'll put it over this, but I don't think I like it more than I like Ninetales. Okay, so Zapdos, I think it's alright. I think it's the weakest of the 3 birds for me. I've only used each of them like once. But I've watched the Power of One movie. Articuno is the best one, right? I do remember fighting in the Mystery Dungeon game, but that was like so long ago. Like I don't remember their fights too much. I remember Rayquaza way more than I remember them. But I did catch them in Leaf Green, and Articuno is also the Power of One movie. Okay, let's talk about the Power of One movie, right? I thought that movie, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 3 favorite Pokemon movies of all time, I think. It's the guy catching all the Pokemon with his weird machines and stuff. I don't know what his name was. All to like awaken Lugia, right? And then having all 3 of them fight Lugia, and then Ash being like this chosen prophet or whatever, with the talking Slowking. Everything about the Power of One was so cool, and because of the Power of One, I have such fond memories. I'll actually move Zapdos up here. I have such fond memories of these three Pokemon in that movie that I have to put them aside, just because I do like them that much, even if I've never used them that much. I do like Articuno more, though, because Articuno's design is obviously the best of the three, and because I do remember that episode where Ash fought Battle Factory head Nolan. His Charizard beat Nolan's friend Articuno. The guy was able to befriend Articuno, by the way. That's insane. Which shows that Articuno is probably the easiest of the three to deal with, right? Dratini is alright. Dragonair is an all-time favorite. Dragonite was a downgrade. I don't know how the hell Dragonair evolved into Dragonite. I really don't. Because Dragonair is such a beautiful Pokemon. And then Dragonite is just kind of like, duh. I shouldn't be like that, right? But, like, that's kind of what I fucking got. That's kind of the impression I got when I first saw Dragonite. It's just kind of derp, right? And my impression of Dragonite has improved over the years, but I still much prefer Dragonair as a design. It's also kind of because I prefer Eastern Dragon concepts to Western Dragon concepts. You know, the Serpentine Dragon as opposed to the one with, like, arms and wings and stuff. And that's partly because I also like the cool thing about snakes evolving into dragons in the Eastern mythologies. So, I just really was disappointed when Dragonair evolved into Dragonite. But I like all of them. Dragonite's also the Pokemon I use in the playthrough. So I think... Alright, so yeah, the Pokemon, if I can recall, my Leaf Green playthrough was Blastoise, Dragonite, Snorlax, Ninetales, Rhydon, and... Oh, I am drawing a blank right now. Who the hell... Jolteon, right? Yeah, Jolteon. So, Jolteon, Dragonite, Rhydon, Snorlax, Ninetales, Blastoise. Wow, they're all in the upper tiers, too. That's crazy. Mew is alright. Mewtwo is pretty cool. I'll put Mew up here. Mewtwo is pretty cool. I like the first Pokemon movie, obviously. I never watched the second one where I guess Giovanni's mom was in it or something. But I did watch the first Mewtwo movie, it's so memorable. Everything about that movie is so memorable. You know, these elite trainers trying to fight Mewtwo, Mewtwo cloning their Pokemon and making the clones fight the originals, Ash quote-unquote dying and then getting resurrected by the tears, Mewtwo flying away with the Pokemon with the clones, Ash battling this random trainer in the intro, and then Mewtwo just, like, controlling storms and stuff. And this is when we all thought, oh, Mewtwo is, like, the strongest Pokemon ever. There's no way we're going to see stronger Pokemon than this. As a kid, that's what I thought. And then Gen 3 happened. I'm not going to say that Lugia or Ho-Oh are stronger than Mewtwo. They could be. They very well could be. Mewtwo's probably stronger than the 3 dog Pokemon. But I don't know if he's stronger than Ho-Oh or Lugia. And I definitely would not say that they are stronger than the Weather Trio or the Creation Trio. Definitely not the Creation Trio, right? But I think Mewtwo's a really cool Pokemon. We all remember our favorite movies. And even though there are aspects of that movie that I look back on and I'm like, I didn't like it that much. Mewtwo is always, like, really cool. Mewtwo himself was always fine. So, in any case, that is the list for all the Kanto Pokemon. I pretty much have them in order as far as, like, what I like. It's kind of just general, like, what tier. As far as what I like more, that's probably so difficult for me to, like, quantify, right? Like, I can do certain things, like, I can place things, like, here or there. But that would be, like... So... yeah. I think there's just, like... this is just generally where I would have all these Pokemon. So... we have all-time favorites. We have really cool Pokemon that I'm fond of. We have Pokemon that I think are just alright. We have Pokemon that I would say are just there. And then there are Pokemon that I have no interest in. So that is the list, everybody. Whether you agree or disagree with my rankings, feel free to comment. What is your favorite Pokemon from the Kanto region? Do keep it like outside, like try and keep other regional influences outside. Unless, the Pokemon has the fairy type attached to it in later generations, right? So, yeah, just leave in the comments below your favorite Kanto Pokemon and your least favorite Kanto Pokemon. And I will see you all later. Also, join the Discord so that we can get to talking with other people about your favorite Pokemon. Also, we have Yu-Gi-Oh! Channel there for anyone who wants to talk about Master Duel and stuff like that. And that'll be it. So I will try and get this uploaded the day of. Alright. So anyway, follow me on Twitter for more updates. I'll probably be doing the Johto tier list next week. And until then, I will see you all later.